Welcome to Roundtable Marketing, the podcast where people who make marketing and people who buy marketing come together. My name is Nick.
And I am Brian.
Let's get started. Brian, how are you today?
Dude, I'm doing awesome. Sun's out. I would say guns out, but we're trying to keep this a modest podcast. And
well, I think that's phase 2 of the podcast. This is also going to be a health journey where by the final episode, I think we'll be shirtless.
Yes.
And proudly so.
Well, and that's, not to tease the audience, but I mean, you pay attention long enough, you'll eventually get to see it. So stay subscribed, because what better than to look forward to that day?
And that was just a taste of what we call a joke, because folks, don't get scared away. We're talking about marketing.
It's fun.
And our first
it's
topic
marketing.
is actually,
why not?
Yeah, right. Well, if someone were to take that first part seriously, I'm afraid we lose listeners. In fact, I'll check the Spotify stats on that timestamp.
Since it's marketing, can we split test? We run it both ways. We see if us mentioning that eventually we're going to be like full muscle show at some point, and then also not. Let's just see how the ratings come in. We'll see what Nielsen
Well, you have
says.
to understand your audience, right?
Well, I know what they want, but I'm going to let the data tell us, because that's a big part about figuring out your audience. It's doing the data and figuring out, would us flexing more on the show help or hurt? And I mean, we all know the answer. We all know the answer.
It's definitely a trust but verify situation. I would agree. Our topic today is the audience journey. And we're covering this first because, like you and I have talked about in the past, this is foundational to a lot of marketing concepts that are helpful to our clients and helpful every day in what we do.
It's foundational to the way we think about working with our clients, but it's also the way that we coach people to work. And so it really has nothing to do with us and has everything to do with the people that are important, which is not the client, it is the audience. And for our clients to go out and try and reach those people, they have to think of them first. They have to put them first. Because otherwise, whatever the effort's going to be, it's going to feel selfish, it's going to feel self-centered, it's going to feel more about you and less about the people that matter, and that's the people you're talking to, your audience.
Right. And I think a big part of empathy and understanding where your audience is coming from isn't just getting their demographics right. It's understanding why they're looking for you in the first place or not looking for you, and sort of what their needs are and what their challenges are. So just tell me, what is the audience journey? And then more specifically, like, why should people care how it works?
Yeah, let me take that second one first. So if you take it up a level, the most important thing for us as humans is relationship. I mean, it is everything. A marine biologist once said to me that if octopuses raised their children, they would have already taken over the planet. And I'm like, what? And he said, no, here's the deal. So they're so advanced and they're so intelligent and they're so capable when they're born that when an octopus emerges from its egg, it doesn't need to be raised. It just already knows how to raise itself, right? Now, octopi, they can communicate in lots of different ways. They have the ability to communicate, a lot of them, through their skin. They can change color. They can also do many things that could be used to form the basis of a communication system. But they don't do it because they don't raise their young. And so they never need society. And so they have not built the empire to take over the world because they never raise their children. So then you think of a human baby being born, and it immediately depends on the mother, right? And so what are the first stages? Well, the first stage of that relationship is bonding through like physical, biological means. But very quickly, what happens is the communication starts. Eye contact starts, facial expressions. A baby starts testing those things out as its eyesight develops, as its hearing develops. It starts developing those things out. But the communication is growing and growing and growing till the point where we're adults and we've made it through childhood. If you were to leave an infant outside for too long, it would not make it. If you were to let the octopus go, it would go. But if you left an infant outside, it wouldn't make it. So this necessity for us to be together and to impart on each other creates the foundation of the way we work, which is relationally through communication. And so we wouldn't survive if we didn't have a relationship. And we couldn't have a relationship outside of the mother-child relationship without communication. That's where the relationships are founded. Me and my wife are married because we talk to each other, because we communicated with each other. We literally took a vow And that's why we're married. That's the official reason we're married, is because we took a vow with each other. So relationships are the most important thing. They're like the fundamental thing about being a human really is the relationship itself. And all of our relationships are built on communication. So if you have a person on the, in a relation that you're in a relationship with, and they're fundamentally on the other side of that relationship, they're on the other side of communication from you. So what does that make them? That makes them an audience for your communication. So pursuing that communication is a very noble cause because it's us pursuing a relationship. Now we take it to a business level and we say as a business, gosh, we have clients, like we have these clients we're dealing with, we have employees, we have potential talent, all these things, right? What do we need there? Well, we need a relationship with them. It's still the same thing. And so in communication, it's still always about the audience. It's not about you. It's not about making sure that everybody knows how great you are. It's about reaching the values that person is looking for in communication and being almost altruistically selfless in the way you talk, because that relationship will then lead to the success you're looking for. And so you bend over backwards for the people you're trying to reach because they're worth it. Now, you got to understand who you are. You can't go about and not have a vision and not have a mission. But if you have a vision and you have a mission, the next step is let's get that audience figured out. And so we say audience first communications, but really it's not because of audience. It's because relationships are first. And that's what's most important, is building those relationships.
Right. Audience almost makes it sound like it's all about a performance, which really it's not. There are some performative elements, especially when you're trying to build business and connect with new people. But that communication piece you're talking about is also vital to maintaining a relationship once you've got one in the first place. And it's vital to moving on to the next phase. Well, let's talk about the beginning of the audience journey, because at this stage, you want to be showing, in my opinion, empathy. Someone who's looking for a brand, and let's use the example of an architecture firm, for example. When people are looking for a brand to do business with or another business, they want to make sure that they're understood, because explaining yourself is frustrating, but also it is hampering potentially to moving on and getting things done.
That's right. And you think about how a communication breakdown when you're working with an architect on your next building, you think of like how bad that could go, and you can imagine it going pretty bad pretty quick. So you're using an architecture firm, and we'll just call it Bob's Architects. Okay, sounds really classy, but Bob's Architects, right? So what's the story of Bob's Architects?
What do they build? What does Bob's Architect build?
Man, Bob's Architects they're famous for building. They build fast food restaurants. So
fast food.
Yeah.
I was thinking
classy.
Like fishing decks.
Okay, what if they build primarily like Captain D's style fish fast food restaurants?
I think that's perfect.
Okay,
yeah, let's combine the ideas.
They build fast casual restaurants. How about make it sound a little more modern? So for the architecture firm, though, the first thing that's going to happen doesn't start with Bob. It starts with the person that's going to potentially work with Bob's architecture firm, and they're going to wake up in the morning and they're going to walk out their door. And Bob's goal is to intersect with them. And that's what the purpose of his marketing is. He wants to intersect with that client and try to reach them. So it starts out with that person walks out their door and they ask the question, who the heck is Bob's architecture firm? Like, that's the first question. They don't know who Bob is, right? And what the goal is to move them from who the heck is Bob's architecture firm all the way to you've got to hear about Bob's architecture firm. So they go from this, I've never heard of it, I don't even know what it is, all the way to now they're referring, and now they're so involved with the brand that now they're an evangelist and they're now communicating the brand, right, through referrals.
And that's the audience journey, right?
That's the audience journey. You want to start from I've never heard of it, and you want to get to I want them to hear about it. So that's the audience journey. And I think that that's a very standardized practice and very standardized understanding of audience journeys. We didn't make that up. Your grandma, when she was doing marketing, this is the same thing she was talking about. But what we've done with our audience journeys, we've really said like, okay, so what is that first step? Hey, who the heck is Bob's architecture firm? What's that step right after that? And we call that first step is awareness. It's actually getting to the audience and helping them understand and just literally to create the awareness of the brand so that that person who's interested in buying a fast casual restaurant, they know that Bob's architecture firm is a brand that they could even interact with, even a brand that they could work with in the first place. So building that awareness.
Great. So building awareness in this phase of the audience journey, there is some planning that goes into this because you want to make sure that you are where your audience is. How do you build awareness and what's the right approach?
Well, first thing is to understand the market itself and who you're going after in the first place, and then get to the places where they live. So if you said, hey, I'm Bob and I want to get every single fast casual joint in the country to know who I am, well, you got to be able to say that because, what he didn't say was I want every fast food restaurant, I want every fine dining restaurant. He said I want fast casual. He understands that. But also he now has to get to them because if he just stands in his boardroom and yells out, hey, look at me, I'm great, no one will hear it. He has to go to the places where that audience actually lives. And he's got to do that through communicating information, education, or promotional topics that actually get to the audience that he's trying to reach where they live. So usually that is taking place in their sandboxes they're already playing in. It's not going to happen in Bob's office unless somebody walks right through the door. They probably already know who he is by then. So he has to get out by virtue of the way this functions. He has to get out there and reach them where they are.
Part of operating successfully in this awareness phase is doing so in a way that gets that audience to the next step. Because there are obviously lots of ways you can make people aware of your company that are going to turn them off.
Yeah, I mean, you could
empathy kind of starts here.
Yeah, because you could go spray paint your logo on the side of a building. It's probably not going to get the right clients for Bob's architecture firm if he does a lot of graffiti. It might get Bob in jail, but that's not a good way to do it. But understanding the strategy of how you reach those folks and how you actually get to that audience is vital to the ways you're going to reach them. But it starts with them. So like I said, spray painting on the side of the building with graffiti and writing Bob's architecture firm and your phone number probably get you put in jail. However, if you were a street fashion brand and you wanted a guerrilla style marketing campaign and you plaster posters along the side of a construction zone and it gets people to go there, that is a good marketing pathway. So those two different audiences are going to need two different things and different ways of marketing. The brand needs to be communicated in different ways. But what's integral to building that awareness is having a clear understanding of who your audience is in the first place.
So you've made them aware. Hopefully, you've made the right people aware. Mm-hmm. Moving on to the next phase of the audience journey, which would be analysis and value matching. How do you make sure you give people the tools to make that analysis and hopefully choose your architecture firm?
That's a great question. So analysis is really about value matching. Analysis is all about the audience seeing in your brand the value propositions that they have, that they hold. So solving those value propositions and understanding what those are and then actually putting them out there for people to understand them is the key component. The audience has pains, gains, and jobs, things they've got to do every day, right? That's what they are. So in this situation, we've got a fast food company. And so one of their jobs is they need to build a new location, right? One of the pains that they have is that these retail establishments, their margins are really tight. And so cost cannot be too high, right? But a gain creator is that if they're placed in the right location, that can be the difference between a successful restaurant and a failed restaurant, right? So those are three things. They got to build a restaurant. It can't be super expensive. And if it's in the right location, it will go really well. Job, pain, gain. So what Bob needs to do is Bob needs to understand that and then develop for himself the pain relievers, the gain creators, and the services that he provides. So does Bob's architecture firm, do they help design buildings? Absolutely they do, right? So that's something they do. Does Bob's help from a cost perspective? Well, they do because they're not the cheapest option and they don't market themselves as the cheapest option, but they do communicate clear value in the buildings and communicate cost savings through efficient lighting options and through energy savings that they can actually...
They might specialize in project management. And for me, that's really valuable because I don't have a project manager for this.
Yeah, right. And so the cost is there. You're going to save the cost of bringing in your own project manager, right? So that would be a pain reliever from the pain the audience has. And then the gain creator is Bob is really, really good at doing site selection and analysis. And so he helps them figure out where they need to build that next restaurant, right? So those are the three things that Bob would want to put out there. And so that value matching is when the audience, they have their values, and then Bob has these value propositions that he's putting out there, and you can see that fittedness coming together. That's what value matching is. So getting to a point where the audience knows who you are, they become aware, but then they, through your marketing, can actually do the analysis that helps move them forward on the audience journey by giving them the values, propositions that you present as a brand.
Well, as you mentioned this, I'm also thinking about the fact that many businesses are going to have different departments involved in this kind of effort. You talk about marketing, but there's also business development is a big part of this. You would want leadership to sort of be driving the value proposition discussion. Talk to me a little bit about, as far as this analysis phase goes, how much of this is being done with help from business development, from sales, from marketing? How can these pieces fit together well? And then for people who run small businesses, it's really about figuring out how and when to wear these different hats.
Yeah, like Bob has 200 employees. He's a really big architecture firm. I mean, that would be a pretty big architecture firm. So Bob's going to be involved as a visionary. He's going to have a lot of his senior team, but he is going to pull in different components and different subject matter experts within the business because they will understand what the audience looks for and the unique things about his business that he can then present as a value proposition. And this is a very fluid process. Like there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of change, and you never really settle on this is the final thing, this is who we are. With value proposition, what you want to be doing is you want to be continuously listening to your audience, listening to your existing customers, listening to your existing people, and continually talking to them and continually listening and then updating your marketing so that it's reacting to that. Right now, there's some big changes happening in the world. In the world of business right now, there's a lot going on because there's a lot of governmental effects, and then they come down, and then how do they trickle throughout your business? So 3 months ago, people may have had a very different value proposition when it came to a topic that has completely changed. If you aren't addressing that as a business and you aren't presenting, oh my gosh, we're the best solution for that problem. If you're not presenting that and changing that, you wouldn't have done that 3 months ago because your audience wasn't interested. Now it's the number one topic on their agenda. And so continually changing that requires you to be on this continuous improvement journey of finding the values that your audience have, creating the value propositions that your business represents, and then making sure those travel to your audience through your marketing.
Well, in the same way that people who are looking into your business aren't going to be able to do that analysis unless they know about you in the first place, they also aren't going to take any action on that analysis unless you're giving them what they need to make a decision one way or the other. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that transition from analysis into action, because I know that a lot of what we do in marketing is encouraging those action steps.
So when it goes from analysis to action, let's go back to Bob. So there's this fast food joint, Brian's Fish Tacos, and fast casual, but Brian's Fish Tacos, right? So Brian wakes up in the morning and he's never heard of Bob. And then he sees an ad, Bob's architecture firm, we make the best restaurants, you make the best food. That's actually a good line. Write that one down. We make the best food, right? And so he's like, oh, Bob's architecture firm, I'm in. So he gets on and he actually starts chasing him down. And he starts looking through the website, looking at the case studies, looking at social media, like following and figuring out, does Bob do what I need done? Oh, he does. He designs fast casual restaurants. That's what I'm starting. By the way, he's local here. So he's somebody that I could work with, right here in town, which would be really valuable to me. Those are things that I'm seeing and I'm wanting to connect with. I'm like, you know what? I'm ready. I understand what I need to understand. So now what? Like, now what do I do? Like, I want to work with you, Bob. What do I got to do? Well, that's take an action step. And so usually when we're talking about action steps, we're going to say that what are the ABCs of action? It's apply, buy, or comply. So apply, I'm going to get a job with Bob. Well, that's not me today. I'm going to buy. Yes, I want to get a new restaurant with you, Bob. Or I'm going to comply. Like if I worked for Bob's team and he has a new initiative that he wants to walk all of us through, that's how I comply. But the ABCs, apply, buy, or comply, those are the ABCs of action. And so I'm trying to take that buy step. So I need to understand what that looks like. Bob, what does it look like to engage you? Do I need to put you on a retainer? Do you want to participate in an RFP, request for proposal process? Is this going to be a handshake deal where we're just going to sit down and we're going to let's go? Like, what is it going to look like for me to actually work with you? And so for me to take the step of action as Brian's fish tacos, I need to understand what that action looks like. And so I've become aware of you. I've gone through the analysis. Now I'm going to take a step of action. What is it? And you'd be shocked, especially with B2B companies, oftentimes it is not clear what it would take to even perform that action with them. And so for Bob, it's very important that he's able to, through his sales process, communicate what it looks like to buy so that Brian's Fish Tacos can become his new client. And so that's what the action's about. So getting to that point where I actually understand as the buyer, what am I supposed to do next, Bob? And then getting in and actually doing it and engaging Bob to build my fish taco restaurant.
Brian, that makes me think of some of the calls to action that you might include in the awareness or the analysis phase. A lot of times there's recommendations or calls to action to check out this ebook or look at this white paper. And I think that's some good training because eventually, like you said, you do want to get them to a place where they're taking an action that leads directly to business.
Right. And this is commerce. He's doing this for money. And yet he can lose sight. And losing sight of the audience sometimes is losing sight of how to get paid. It really is. I mean, you'd be shocked at how often there are conversations with our controller at our business talking to our clients who just don't know how to pay us. You know, they don't even know how to do it, right? I mean, it's amazing, but it's an important part of communication is understanding what does it take to make that step and actually guiding them through it. I was talking to a potential partner recently for the business, you know, an agency partnership that we were talking about. And he asked the magic question of me, like, what would it look like for you to work with us? You know, that was a question he asked, right? So for me, it's like, this is the dream scenario. He's been made aware. He thinks we can help him out, but now he wants to know, like, what does it take to do it, right? And so communicating that action step was now on me to explain how to do it with him. And he understood it, and, you know, things are moving forward, right? Like, that's the beauty of it. So understanding that action is fundamentally, it's a part of the communication because you got to communicate how to do it in the first place. But then you actually have to take that step of action. So Brian's taco joint, I need to actually now sign a contract with Bob and go forward. And now we've just passed over the threshold of where I was a lead and I was a prospect. Now I'm a client, right? And I've actually crossed that magic threshold where now we're working together.
And I think all along the way, giving them actions to take that lead them to that most important action, then leading to adoption, where there's actually an ongoing relationship here. And most clients want to adopt because they've done all this analysis now. They've gotten to know you. They want it to work out. I think about the times I've gone to buy a shirt from the department store and there's a salesperson there and they're really effective because what they're doing is they're asking me questions and I'm answering those questions. And those questions might not have anything to do with the shirt I'm eventually going to buy, but it's all leading me to that next step where I am going to buy a shirt from them because they got to know me a little bit. Now, this is kind of why I avoid those kinds of salespeople. But I think with something like architecture, you want to make sure you're starting a good relationship. So some of that relationship building is welcome and even encouraged.
Yeah, and in that analogy of the salesperson at the department store, like they're building a relationship with you the whole time so that it's going to pay dividends, because what'll happen is once you swipe your credit card, you're probably going to walk out of the store. So your adoption step when you buy your t-shirt is going to be, the adoption is literally wanting to wear it and it now becoming the external
it's a collared shirt.
Oh,
I'm not talking to a salesperson about a t-shirt, although
at Hot Topic,
I'd love to get to that level.
Yeah.
I'd love to be at that stage.
No, at Hot Topic, they were talking about the difference between this. I like Fallout Boy. I don't know what's at Hot Topic anymore. So
yeah, I think it's a bunch of Fallout Boy and Blink 182 shirts. I don't think we need to check.
Yeah. Let's not look it up. But no, but that your adoption of that is to wear the shirt, right? You know, your collared shirt.
Right.
For the architecture firm, like their adoption is the process of building their building, and like designing their building. And so that's the process. That's the piece of this journey, is like actually the interaction with the client when you're delivering the service that you provide. And so it's funny because it's 20% of the audience journey, but it's really the biggest part of the audience journey really is the adoption often. And it's how your business delivers. This is the operation of your business. This is how you work with the clients. Now, why do we include it as part of the audience journey? Because what function does you delivering what you do affect your marketing? In some ways, the answer is none. Like now you're not marketing to them, right? However, when you say, how does communication affect the adoption phase? The answer is 100%. Because in working with the client, how you're corresponding with them, how you're going back and forth with them, but also like, what are your core values as a business? Are you representing those core values and actually mentioning the core values in your process with the client? Like if you said, hey, one of my core values is we're audience first. Well, in our work with our clients, if we ask them, would you say that Black Raven is audience first? If they would say no, it means we're not communicating our value to them, like one of our clear, most important values. Now, I would say, thankfully, most of our clients would say yes to that. But another one of our core values is, are we hard to work with? We're not hard to work with, right? So we would ask our clients that. And like, we would hope that our clients would say, no, we're not hard to work with. But those are things that we need to be communicating and working out through the adoption process with our clients all the time so that they are understanding who we are and we're taking care of them as an audience through that portion of the journey. Because where does that lead into? Well, awareness, analysis, action, adoption. There is a last step, and that's advocacy. That means that you now have a fan. You now have an evangelist. And why is that important to get there? You could stop at adoption. You gave them the stuff they needed. They wrote you a check. Game over, right? But it is a much higher and greater purpose than just giving somebody something would be to get somebody that actually wanted to advocate for you. And it's good for two reasons. One marketing effort becomes 2 sales or 20 sales, right? That's good. But the second is you can have advocates that are not your clients. People can advocate for your brand. We won a contract with a client and they said who referred them. And I had never heard of this person before. And the person said, oh, you got to meet these guys. They're great, right? So I talked with her and I'm like, I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know who referred you. And why? And it's like, well, at least on that day, we had met that golden standard of being that people could advocate for us. Somebody literally advocated for us that I do not know who they are. I'm telling you, I still don't know who they are. And they advocated and said, you need to talk to Black Raven. And so we've won work because of that advocacy step, because we focus on that. We were ready to be referred. It was great.
Yeah, and I just think about, your most effective salespeople sometimes aren't on your payroll because we love salespeople, of course. Salespeople can help us understand things better. They can answer our questions. They get back to us. They know our favorite coffee. It's great to help build a relationship. But then when you're trying to learn more about someone you want to work with, potentially hearing, like you said, from a third party, it just carries that much more weight because they're not being paid to tell you this. In fact, they want a little social capital from sharing this great secret. In this case, Black Raven. Yeah,
well, in the value proposition world, they would want to be a provider of value. So that's one of their gains, right? They want to be a provider of value. So you create for them the ability for them to be a provider of value, a referrer of value. Like you can do that. And that's a value. Like that is a value proposition that we want to communicate is like, once you start working with us, you're going to have like something we like to say is hire us for anything. Doesn't even matter what it is. If you hire us for one thing, you're going to get our cell phone number and then you're going to save it to your speed dial and you're never going to lose it. And you're going to call it again and again and again. Right? Well, that's a self-referral. Like they're bringing it back to themselves. We're telling them like working with us, you're solving a problem that you won't have to solve twice. And that's a good thing. That's something that we want to communicate to businesses. And so we talk about that a lot. I've literally had that conversation. I'm like, here's what's going to happen. You'll have my cell phone number. You will not lose it. You'll keep calling it. Once you call me once, you're going to call me over and over again, because you're going to find that working with our team is what makes your life easier. And then you're going to keep doing that over and over again. We want you to be advocating to yourself, so that we're not recreating you as a client every single time, but we're actually getting you to be a return client. So that's something that we try and do as a business. But to meet the standard of advocacy, your goal is you want to be relatable, reliable, and referable. Relatable. Like, I understand how this business works. I get them. Like, they make sense to me, right? I'm not confused about what they do. I'm not confused about the services. I can tell you about it. Like, I can tell you what they do. I worked with them. I know what it is, and I can tell you what it looks like. Reliable means that they're not going to let you down. You know, they're going to meet or beat their deadlines. They're going to actually give you what you asked for in the first place for the money that you were going to pay. Sometimes something goes wrong on the project and they say, you know what, I'm going to take that because that was us that did that, right? They're reliable, right? You know that if you engage with that business, you're going to get it out of them. And then referable means that not only are they a business that you can understand those things about and you know they're going to be reliable, but they actually explain to you how to refer them. So it's easy with a services business, you know, Bob's architect firm, they're going to know, gosh, I mean, I called them, you just call their cell phone. I'll give you Bob's number. I've got it, right? That's referable. But what if Bob was actually intentional about that and said, hey, we love it when you refer your friends. This project went really well for you. Would you be willing to introduce us to anybody who you think could work with us? Doing that right after the sale is pretty cool. Like, you would think, like, why wouldn't I do it after the project is done? Like, the happiest anybody's ever going to be with you is when they made that step and took the step of action and actually made the buy. So at that moment, ask them for a referral and explain what that referral would look like. You know, are you going to incentivize it? Is there money involved? Or is it just a goodwill sort of thing? And scratch my back, I scratch yours. I give referrals constantly. I don't expect anything out of them. I just give them because they're good, right? And so being relatable, reliable, and referable is being somebody that people can understand, somebody that people can depend on, and somebody that you actually know how to refer them in the first place, so that that next person can then skip a couple steps on the audience journey and go straight into late stage analysis.
Well, Brian, I have a two-part question that will either help us wrap this conversation up, or it'll just launch a whole other discussion and this becomes a much longer podcast. But I'm going to do it anyway. The first part of my question is, this audience journey, understanding awareness, analysis, action, adoption, advocacy, is it something that is happening all the time with certain clients? And I'm thinking it, you know, maybe Bob's architecture firm also provides, like we said, project management. They provide other services that they want to walk people through this process. And then my second question is, can understanding your audience's journey help you create a practical way of running your business?
Well, to the first question is it happening all the time? I would say that the first way you need to think about it is each person in your audience, each constituent in your audience is an individual human being with goals and dreams and a life to live. And they also have one clock that always runs in the same direction. So for them, their audience journey is linear. And when you intersect with them, they're either going to get on, like, awareness is going to be made. And then there's some point on that journey where they can take an exit ramp. So whether that's because they've now been advocating for you for years and years and years and your business ends, or things didn't work out well and they're jumping off and they don't want to talk to you anymore, right? And they don't want to talk about you anymore, right? But their journey is linear. So each of these individual audience members have a linear journey, and that goes through with you. However, there are different things you do. So how many times have we been on a call with a client and we tell them we do something and they're like, I didn't know you did that. That right there was a moment where they knew about our brand, but did they know about that component of our brand yet? Well, no, we just bumped them back into analysis because we're like, hey, you guys are working on this project. Do you know we do that too? And they're like, I didn't know that. Analysis. I mean, that's the whole idea of account management, is to create opportunities to keep telling people that story of the brand, you know, and that often happens off your marketing and straight in your intercommunication with the client, right? So
yeah, especially if your business is changing all the time because of new technology or something like that.
Well, and we like to say our business is growing all the time. We're not changing all the time. But it follows that we 10 years ago didn't do a lot of what we do today. 20 years ago, some of the things we do, you couldn't do. You literally could not manage a TikTok account 10 years ago. You couldn't manage a Facebook account 20 years ago. So would your guess be that 10 years from today, we would be doing different things? The answer is absolutely we will. That is the name of the game. So what stayed the same, and we haven't been in the business for 20 years, but what has stayed the same is audiences are still people, and they're still out there, and they still need to be reached and taken care of. And so that's something that we're going to be able to do for our clients for a long time. And so the audience journey, keeping this truism that people are people and they're going through this journey, but the world is changing, the business is changing, you're changing as a business, the marketplace is changing. All those are going through their different phases. Yeah, there's a lot of points where it's going to keep looping back and having audience journey start all over again for people. Your second question
I'll
was what?
Yes. I was going to say, I'll reframe that. I'll re-ask that. But the second part of the question was, can a better understanding of the audience journey help you design how your business operates, specifically how you communicate with clients?
It can, and especially for two reasons. The first reason that it can help is because caring about your audience is one of the most vital things you can do for your business. So any business will benefit from paying attention and actually working on their audience journey and thinking through what is their audience journey. Has it changed? Are there things we need to update? Have we changed? Do we need to change the values we put out there? Do we need to start reaching an audience in a different place that we weren't reaching them before? There's a lot of questions like that, right? But the second benefit, and this one's the really cool one, is there are many businesses that never consider their marketing as a fundamental growth and driver for their business. You know, they make a widget and they're really good at making a widget, and everybody found out about their widget making and they never did any marketing. Maybe they have a sales force that has been driving it and they've been doing all their revenue off of sales. There are many businesses that those two legs of the stool, their brand itself and their sales force, their business development, that's the only two legs of their stool. So when they now say, okay, we're going to think about this in an even bigger way, we're going to pay attention to our audience journey, and we're going to pull in the things that you can do to reach them. When you first go down the path of what is our audience journey, what are they doing, you then find, oh my gosh, there is this whole entire other way of bringing this audience to us, and it's called marketing. When they get into that, now they have the three-legged stool and they're bringing people to them. And so I think every business would benefit from paying attention and mapping out their audience journey. I think even more so, the businesses that don't lean on marketing today will especially get the bang for their buck, because they're going to find a whole new pipeline out there because they're finally paying attention to the people they're trying to serve.
Well, what I love about this is that understanding the audience journey can really help people find your firm. If it's the architecture client, people are going to be more aware of Bob's architecture firm. Additionally, it'll help you identify and attract ideal customers.
That's right.
And as a result, you're going to have better relationships. So I think it's really fascinating.
Awesome. Well, I've had this in my head for a long time. Like I said, my grandma, when she first started a marketing firm in my made-up world where my grandma was in marketing. Actually, my grandma worked at Steak and Shake when I was a kid. And
okay,
I know someone else who worked
at
Steak and Shake. Yes, but my grandma worked at Steak and Shake when I was a kid. But no, none of my grandmas were in marketing. But this concept, the audience journey, is not new. This is a concept that marketing has used forever. But for me, when it finally clicked was when I said, okay, we've got an audience journey, but now what do we do about it as a business to deal with that? And that's when I developed my marketing roadmap process, which is remember we're teasing about us not wearing shirts in the later ones, and flexing our muscles more.
No, in truth, we'll be fully clothed talking about how to build a marketing roadmap.
Yes, and that'll tie everything together, because the whole idea is that this is the unified audience mapping. And it's not just the audience journey, but it's also that marketing roadmap, and those coincide with each other. So get psyched.
Perfect.
Listeners,
can't wait to get into it. Well, you can't go on a journey if you don't have a roadmap.
Yeah, and you can't you can't follow us for real if you don't smash that subscribe button at the bottom on the marketing road.
Absolutely.
On the marketing, what are we called? Roundtable Marketing Roundtable.
Roundtable Marketing Podcast.
Roundtable
That's the
Marketing.
podcast you've been listening to. Just like Brian said, you can like, subscribe, follow. We're on Spotify. We're going to be on all the other ones.
All the other ones. The Thing.
If you're
The second one.
if you're curious if we'll be on your platform, the answer is yes. Apple, Amazon.
You're already listening to it wherever you're listening to it, and we're on that platform. If you were listening to it somewhere else, then you would be on that platform. So we'll be on those, both of them, or at least the one.
Brian, looking forward to it.
Me too.
It's been great talking to you.
You too, Nikki.
See you soon. Bye.